Talk to anyone who's been on a cruise and the chances are they'll mention the food. On a cruise, food isn't just a form of nourishment, it's a form of entertainment. And there's plenty of it too. You could wake up in the morning and have breakfast in bed, followed by a second breakfast in the ship's buffet. You could then make the latter part of the main seating in the dining room and have a formal breakfast, followed by morning tea back in the buffet. And it's not even 12 o'clock yet. With food available around the clock on pretty much every cruise ship during every voyage, it will come as no surprise to you that cruise ships order a lot of food. So with the ongoing cruise pause, putting 300 cruise ships into layup around the world, what's happened to all that food? I'm Chris Frame, and today we're going to be talking about what's happened to all the food on board the cruise ships, both at the beginning of the cruise pause and even now. When cruise ships order food, they order big. This isn't your average supermarket shop. Quite often, cruise lines like to wow their guests by sharing remarkable food usage stats from on board their ships. You can often find this information on cruise line websites or on fact sheets found on board. For example, a ship the size of Queen Mary 2 uses enough tea in a year to fill an Olympic-sized swimming pool. They also use 1.5 million eggs during the year, 8,000 bags of flour, and 372,000 packs of cereal. Can you imagine trying to fit that into your shopping basket? To manage the storage of food, cruise ships usually have multiple food storage areas. These areas take up huge spaces within the ship, often below the waterline and away from the eyes of passengers. These stores consist of huge walk-in refrigerators and freezers, as well as multiple dry storerooms. These stores remain well stocked and organized at all times, thanks to a dedicated team and specialized computer systems that are responsible for ordering supplies. But we all know that 2020 is not a good example of what is normal, with cruise lines entering into a voluntary cruise pause back in March. With sailings cancelled and ships entering into warm layup, you can see my video about that in the info card there, cruise lines were left with huge quantities of food and perishable stores on board, and no passengers left to feed. It is an alarming statistic that across the world, it is estimated that roughly 1/3 of all food produced is wasted. Having 300 cruise ships around the world suddenly laid up could have certainly led to even more food waste. So an alternative use needed to be found. And we're not just talking about food that was already on board. Dealing with such large quantities of food requires a supply chain and forward planning to ensure the right goods and quantities are available and delivered to the ship on time. You probably couldn't find 2,400 dozen eggs at short notice, which is what you'd need for a typical week on board Queen Mary 2. Orders are placed well in advance of a cruise departure, with items arriving at the port in advance of a cruise ship turnaround, where new produce is loaded on board. When the cruise pause came into effect, not only was there food aboard the ships, but plenty of stock was also waiting to be loaded on board. Furthermore, orders for subsequent voyages had already been processed, and in many cases was en route to cruise ports around the world. While not all food is perishable, and some things can last for months in storage, many items cannot. Fresh fruit, vegetables, meat, eggs, and dairy all have a limited shelf life, and there was far too much left on board the cruise ships to be eaten by the officers and crew who remain on board. So to the disappointment of the local seagulls, the cruise lines looked to shoreside charities to help distribute this food to those in need. Donating to charities isn't new to cruise lines, with many lines pledging money in support of the Australian bushfire relief in early 2020, as well as offering financial and logistical support to hurricane-devastated regions, such as the Bahamas in the wake of Hurricane Dorian. And while donating produce isn't entirely new to some cruise lines, the scope following the cruise pause certainly is. For example, in Vancouver, Holland America donated several shipping containers worth of food to the Greater Vancouver Food Bank. UK brands, Cunard and P&O, both donated their excess food to UK Harvest, with logistics handled in the ship's home port of Southampton. UK-based Fred Olsen Cruise Line donated many of its excess perishables in Scotland, where the fleet is currently in warm layup. However, they also donated plenty of food far from home in Barbados. When ships are sailing on longer duration voyages, such as world cruises, or when they are based somewhere other than their home port, produce is taken on board at various international ports. If you have travelled on one of these long duration voyages, you may have noticed that items that come in their original packaging, such as cereal boxes or cans of soft drink or soda, may have originated in unexpected places. It's possible for a group of friends on a world cruise to all order the same thing, say a can of cola, and each one will have originated from a different country. If you haven't noticed this before, keep an eye out next time you're on board. As the cruise pause happened at the tail end of the northern winter season, there are a high number of ships undertaking itineraries away from their usual base of operations. This meant that there were also a number of food orders that were no longer needed, in places other than the usual home ports of these ships. Fred Olsen's ship Braemar was one such example. Sailing in the Caribbean, she was due to take on supplies and had a container worth of food waiting in Barbados. When Braemar was denied access to the port, the line worked to distribute the food to numerous local charities. As a side note on the topic of food, it's interesting to think about what food service was like on the old ocean liners. Today, food is sort of synonymous with the modern cruise experience. You board a ship, no matter what kind of ship, going to whatever destination, and you expect to be fed, and to be fed well. But this wasn't always the case. In fact, on some voyages, particularly before the age of steam, passengers were expected to bring their own food. Another thing that cruise lines have been doing during the unprecedented cruise pause is sharing some of their famous recipes with passengers so that they can make these dishes at home. Recent examples include Cunard Line, which has shared its iconic scone recipe. And if you search social media, you can see many people who are making those scones at home and enjoying the afternoon tea experience during the cruising shutdown. The immediate knock-on effects of COVID have impacted many people around the world, including those working within the travel industry. Even though donating the excess food doesn't fix those problems, it's nice to know that not all of the food that was originally destined for cruise passengers has gone to waste. If you found the video interesting, please give it a thumbs up. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss future videos. So what's your favourite dish to eat on board a cruise ship, and do you have a favourite line or brand that makes the best food? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video and you'd like to know more about what's happening during the cruising pause, check out my Cruising and COVID playlist. Or if you're more interested in maritime history and would like to have some more context around stories such as how it was like to sail on those ocean liners of days gone by, check out my maritime history playlist. Thanks again for watching, and when we are able to set sail again, I hope to see you on board.